Good morning, everyone. It's an enormous pleasure to be here this morning. When we launched the Earthshot Prize in 2020, we believed we could show the world evidence of progress towards what felt like immense climate and nature goals.
The heavy wooden doors of Windsor Castle had never felt quite so impenetrable as they did on the afternoon the public finally learned the truth. When Prince William and Princess Anne stepped forward together, they did not merely deliver a health update. They confirmed a crisis that the palace had been desperately scrambling to manage behind closed doors for weeks. The immediate, unsettling tension of the moment arose not just from the gravity of King Charles's illness, but from a stark, undeniable contradiction. The official timeline of this emergency completely undermined the narrative that royal staff and the public had been fed right up until the moment the heir to the throne stood at the lectern. William kept both hands pressed firmly against the dark wood, his knuckles pale under the strain, while Anne stood beside him, her fingers tightly gripping a handkerchief she never once raised to her face. The image alone, broadcast to millions, signaled that the machinery of the monarchy was facing an unprecedented reckoning. In this exclusive investigation, Royal Scope brings you the definitive, untold account of the silent coup and the family confrontation that reshaped the House of Windsor. What the public witnessed at that lectern was the climax of a secret struggle that had pushed the royal family to its absolute limit. King Charles had suffered an acute cardiac episode immediately following a highly sensitive private briefing, collapsing without warning and requiring emergency intervention. Doctors quickly uncovered cardiovascular complications so severe that they demanded the immediate and indefinite suspension of every single one of his public and sovereign duties. The daily flow of red dispatch boxes, the signing of state papers, and the crucial diplomatic audiences that represent the active pulse of the crown suddenly ground to a halt. When William paused mid-sentence during the broadcast, struggling to control his voice as he spoke the words, "My father," the raw vulnerability of the future king was laid bare. Beside him, Princess Anne, legendary for her unflappable stoicism, looked visibly devastated, signaling to the world that the shield of royal invincibility had shattered. But beneath the solemn announcements lay a deeply guarded secret regarding when this crisis actually began. William eventually confirmed a detailed medical account revealing that the king had lost consciousness and remained entirely unresponsive during those critical first minutes, requiring specialists to stabilize his heart. Yet, it was and who privately disclosed the most damning detail of all. Charles had been suffering from severe breathlessness, sudden dizziness, and crushing chest pressure for weeks leading up to his collapse. The sovereign had stubbornly dismissed every warning as mere fatigue, even laughing when his sister implored him to step back. This revelation changed everything. The palace was not blindsided by a sudden medical emergency. They were actively managing a rapidly deteriorating situation while publicly maintaining that all was well. The turning point had occurred 3 weeks prior inside St. George's Hall. During a rehearsal for an upcoming investiture, the king suddenly stopped mid-procession, his right hand tightening with a white-knuckled grip around the back of a nearby chair. His face lost all color, and for 11 agonizing seconds, he stood frozen, unable to respond as Princess Anne called his name. The rehearsal was halted immediately, the heavy doors were locked, and every witness was strictly instructed to report the incident as a minor scheduling delay. Anne reached her brother first, catching his arm as he gasped for air, and demanded he see a physician. Though Charles initially refused an ambulance, and threatened to cancel the entire investiture unless he submitted to an immediate examination. The palace physician recommended absolute rest and urgent cardiac testing. Charles nodded, signed a temporarily reduced schedule, and promised to comply. Yet, within days, his deep-seated fear of creating national panic drove him to override his doctors, quietly slipping official meetings back onto his calendar. To Anne, this was not courage, it was recklessness. In a heated confrontation behind closed doors, she told her brother that his devotion to duty did not give him the right to force his family to watch a preventable tragedy unfold. Charles did not deny the danger, yet he ordered his staff to keep the incident entirely out of the daily royal briefing notes. He was determined to protect William from the burden of his failing health during an already demanding period. This decision backfired spectacularly. Instead of feeling protected, William felt deeply betrayed when the truth finally emerged. He found himself expected to assume the mantle of the state without having been given the vital medical context of his father's condition. The fracture within the family deepened when a royal footman documented a second incident, where the king became violently dizzy after a private dinner and had to steady himself against a corridor wall. Queen Camilla had known about both episodes. While she had initially urged her husband to rest, She ultimately supported his demands for absolute secrecy. William viewed this silence as a dangerous enablement of a cover-up, while Anne saw it as proof that fear had completely overruled sound judgment. Camilla suddenly found herself in an impossible position, caught between her fierce loyalty to her husband's wishes and the stark reality that those wishes were actively endangering his life. When senior physicians eventually bypassed her to speak directly with William and Anne, the queen consort was left standing outside the closed door, a poignant reminder of the unyielding boundary between the royal bloodline and those who marry into it. If you want to stay ahead of the curve on the internal struggles, hidden histories, and shifting alliances of the British monarchy, take a moment to subscribe to Royal Scope, like this video, and share your thoughts in the comments below on whether a monarch should ever hide their health from the heir. Armed with the truth, William took matters into his own hands. Entering his father's private study, he opened the royal engagement diary to find cancelled medical appointments systematically replaced with state meetings. When the private secretary confirmed that the king himself had authorized the overrides, William gathered the medical files and, alongside Anne, walked directly to the king's private suite. The confrontation that followed was devoid of royal protocol. William placed the medical file on the bedside table and asked his father directly why he believed his family had no right to know. Charles, despite his exhaustion, tried to assert his authority, demanding to know how a confidential file had left the medical office. But William remained unmoved. He made it clear that because state papers and diplomatic briefings were already being redirected to his desk, he could not protect the institution while being kept in the dark about the health of the man at its center. In a moment of raw emotion, William accused his father of treating family love as a weakness to be managed, to which Charles replied that an heir should not be burdened with every private fear. William's response was swift and definitive. He was not speaking as the heir, but as a son who had nearly lost his father without warning, and refused to let Charles retreat into denial, reminding him of his broken promises and stating coldly that his secrecy had forced everyone around him to participate in a dangerous illusion. It was then that Charles finally admitted his deepest fear. In a private conversation recorded by his secretary, the monarch confessed that the prospect of stepping back terrified him far more than his physical symptoms. He feared that once William assumed his duties, the nation would realize how seamlessly the crown could function without him. The transition, however, could no longer be delayed. Before sunrise, the red dispatch boxes were officially redirected to Prince William's study. While Charles remained sovereign, the active power of the monarchy had shifted. William took control of high-level government briefings and state affairs, while Anne assumed management of the royal household, carefully canceling events that would place any further strain on the king. At their first formal transition meeting, an aide instinctively pulled out the king's chair for William, but the prince stopped him, refusing to sit in his father's seat, a powerful gesture of loyalty that respected the living monarch while acknowledging the gravity of the shift. When Camilla questioned Anne's authority to alter the royal calendar, the Princess Royal made it clear that stability now required objective decisions free from emotional interference. Charles himself finalized this arrangement, dictating an official instruction that granted William full authority over external duties and placing Anne in charge of the household and public communications. A second, brief heart rhythm disturbance during the night solidified the permanence of these changes. Specialists confirmed that a return to Charles's previous workload could prove catastrophic, effectively removing a full recovery from all palace planning. William and Catherine sat down with their children to gently explain the situation, reassuring young Prince George that their primary duty now was to support each other as a family. In a final intimate meeting with William and Anne, Charles formally accepted his new reality. He apologized for the deception, admitting that his fear of his own irrelevance had driven his secrecy. William comforted his father, reminding him that being needed by the state and being loved by his family were two entirely different things. Charles officially authorized the long-term transfer of public duties, while Anne promised to maintain harmony across the wider family. The public response was immediate and deeply moving. Thousands gathered outside Windsor Castle, leaving flowers and messages of support, while the national media shifted its focus from constitutional anxiety to the heavy human cost of lifelong service. In a final televised message to the nation, King Charles spoke with profound honesty, thanking the public and declaring that the crown is at its strongest when duty is shared and truth is spoken. Through this crucible, the House of Windsor did not falter. Indeed, by allowing its sovereign to finally show his humanity, the family ensured that the monarchy would endure.